Think back to that last big blockbuster movie you saw. The special effects blew you away. It was incredible. It was like you were there in the action. But the story really was kind of full of holes and didn't really connect with you. And yeah, you remember the visual effects, but you've forgotten the entire bit of information that they shared. That story, the plot, all that was really trash. Don't let that happen to your presentations. Now, when you're starting to build your speech and you're going to throw that PowerPoint out there and you're really going to wow your audience, realize what you're doing with the PowerPoint, what you're doing with the video, what you are doing with visual aids is you're enhancing, not overwhelming. And that leads us into our discussion about presentation aids. What we need to talk about is using visual aids. The kinds you encounter, technology, and some of the other guidelines you'll find helpful. Visual aids can be many things. It can be very complex. It can be very simple. It can be an object. You may hold up the new wonderful kitchen tool that you're selling, or you might hold up a model of a windmill. There are multiple types you may utilize. Photographs. A picture's worth 1,000 words. And in that case, it truly can enhance exactly what you're trying to state. Rather than trying to describe a scene for 15 minutes, you can instead show a picture, and your audience can be transported there. Photographs and drawings, graphs, charts. We love these. We think they are the most persuasive thing we ever encountered. If you look back at the history of USA Today, they became a major newspaper not because of the headlines, not necessarily because of the articles, but they put everything into a pie chart. Everything was a graph. You could walk by and absorb information rapidly, good and bad. Because yes, you can grab information rapidly, but people tend to distrust it. As we talked about before with statistics and that type of data, you have to be careful how you use them. Same with graphs and charts. Additionally, you have to make sure it's visible to your audience. Not a small graph in a large audience. You need to make sure they're visible. And videos. Videos can truly enhance your presentation, but it is also one of the biggest shortcuts I see students try to take. I got a 5-minute speech. What I'm going to do for 5 minutes? I'll show a 2.5-minute video, then I only have to speak for 2.5 minutes. Whoa, not a good idea. That is once again going back to that Hollywood blockbuster where they overwhelm you with, hey, here's the great special effects, but our actual content's really not there. Don't do that with your speech. If you're going to use a video, you want to limit it. You want about, in a 5-minute speech, you don't want more than 15 to 20 seconds of videos in there. They can be effective. They can get their point across rapidly, but they can also overwhelm your speech. But the biggest visual aid you have is you. If you utilize yourself and you realize your body language, your presentation, the clothing that you wear, that all comes into play. You might try some theatrical garb to truly connect quickly with your audience because that's visual and it is real life and it truly does get your audience to, hey, I wonder what they're talking about. And that's the reason why you see the commercials. You don't have just actors walking around, you have actors in lab coats. If you're looking at a show that's teaching you about cooking, they have the apron on, the chef hat. The speaker is your strongest visual aid. And what's nice about it is rarely does your presentation overwhelm the content. It is a very good way to enhance the content. Technology. Technology is truly wonderful. We love it. We depend upon it until it fails us. Until for some reason it goes wrong. So when you're looking at utilizing technology, you have to understand several things. First of all, you need to pre-scout where you're presenting at. You need to know what technology is going to be available. If you walk into a place, you're going to show a wonderful PowerPoint that you spent 3 hours developing, and wow, it is super. And then you find out they don't have an overhead projector. Or you find out that their adapter to plug into your computer where all the information is doesn't connect to your computer. These things happen very frequently. Plus, if you're using technology, you need a plan to use it, which means you need to practice with it. If you're going to deliver using a PowerPoint or another similar tool, you better know how to utilize it and you better practice with it. So when you've gone from outlining and you've created your full sentence outline and you've gotten down to that keyword, when you're practicing with that keyword outline, throw that technology you're utilizing in so it's smooth, so you understand it. Other things that people commonly encounter with technology, rather than embedding a video, they put the link right there on the PowerPoint. So that way, when the time comes up to show that 15-second video, oh, they'll just click on that. What they encounter, though, is a lot of troubles because at that point, it takes them out of there. They're no longer in their PowerPoint. They have to go to the World Wide Web. They go to YouTube. They have now departed their presentation and taken their audience on this bizarre journey to the internet, and then they try to come back from it. And that return voyage can be just as difficult because you come back, you're trying to get back into the PowerPoint to the point that you were, and some people can do it, but oftentimes they don't do it well. So they haven't planned on using the technology. If you're going to use something, practice with it, embed videos, put them so they actually part of your PowerPoint so people don't have to go searching and you don't have to stop your speech, shift, stop your speech, shift. Because at that point your audience has left. Watch that. Prepare your visual aids well in advance. In this case, you definitely need to have them ready at the same time you have your keyword outline ready. You don't want to have your keyword outline ready and then you wait to put your PowerPoint together at the last minute. You don't have time to practice with it and it comes off clunky. Keep visual aids simple. The whole Hollywood blockbuster theory. Yeah, you know, there are absolute videos that talk about death by PowerPoint, and it is true. Words bouncing, words shooting across the screen, things flipping, lights flashing, all of those are distractions. They lose your content. They overwhelm it. People go out there, wow, did you see what those words were spinning? That was cool. And then they went into a black hole and they zoomed away. Wow, what incredible. Well, what was the speech about? Oh, I have no clue, but wow, the visuals were great. Presentation technology. Here's a couple other pointers you want to keep, some of your guidelines. Make them large enough to read. Absolutely. At the minimum, you should be looking at your fonts being a 24 on your PowerPoint. 22, 24, anything in that range, you're going to be okay. A 12, you're not going to see it. And the other thing is, people, if they can't see it, they stop paying attention. Or they shift their attention from paying attention to what you're saying, and they're straining their eyes to read your PowerPoint. Don't use a lot of text. Don't fill up the entire screen. You got a huge space, don't use it all. Be very strategic in how much you use. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Use fonts effectively. Fonts. Stick to simple ones that people can read, that they can see from a distance. Realize if you're using Comic Sans and you're delivering a very serious speech on philosophy, your audience is going to have a hard time believing you because you kind of distracted your ethos by putting Comic Sans on there. Or maybe you're using Chiller and you're trying to really present a upbeat, happy one and there's blood coming off your letters. Ew. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you use it effectively. Color. Keep it with something with a high contrast. So many of my presentations, I just use simple black and white. Maybe a red on white, but I don't make my background blend in. Plus, remember, you may have audience members that are colorblind. So if you're using green and red, People may not see anything on your screen at all. So be aware that you need to keep your colors effective, simple, so audience can see it. Use images strategically. If you're going to use an image, yes, you should. You should have something up there that just doesn't bore your audience to death. But you don't want it to be where it's overwhelming. You don't want to have pictures flying in and out like we talked about. You want to use something your audience can look at, okay, yeah, not a problem, but they're still going to pay attention to the content. Guidelines. Display visual aids where listeners can see them. Realize that setting a laptop facing towards the audience in front of a classroom, your first row will maybe the actual people center of the first row will see your PowerPoint. The people behind them won't see it. People to the sides see some of it flashing on screen. They won't see it well. So you do need that overhead projector. You need to have something where your audience can absolutely see that. And you want to make sure that you have speakers that are loud enough that people can hear it. You don't want it where people are going, because there are going to be other distractions, paper shuffling, cell phones, things of that variety can easily make it difficult to hear. So make sure that what you're presenting can be heard. If you're using a model, if you're using some type of visual aid that's not a PowerPoint, but an actual something you're holding in front of you, do not pass it along the audience. Because first of all, the audience might drop it. They might tear a photo, a cherished family photo, not on purpose, but on accident in the process of passing it around. Maybe the person next to him wasn't paying attention. Oops, it drops. And there goes your grandfather's watch that you had saved and cherished for years. Don't pass it around. Plus, what you're doing at that point is you're also passing around, disengaging your audience. Because you hand it to the first person, that person is no longer paying attention to you. They have object to pay attention to. So they're now out of your audience. They pass to the next person. That person, no longer paying attention to you, paying attention to whatever you're handing around. And so on, and so on, and so on. And that will ensure that you have a wave going through your audience of disengaging from the content. So don't pass things around. Visual aids only should be out when you're discussing them. Because if you leave a visual aid sitting in front of you as you're presenting, people might be really wanting to know what that is. But you're not going to tell them until halfway through your speech. So that first half, they're not paying attention to you, they're looking at the object. Additionally, if you're going to have handouts, an activity for your audience, hand it out at the time. Don't put it there in front of them. You know, when they come in, they sit down, oh, look, here's information. Their heads drop, their attention is there, they are lost. They're not paying attention to you, they're reading your neat little handout, looking through it. You know, I bet you I could make a paper airplane out of this. You've lost them even before you got them. So if your handouts, hand them out when they're needed, and then tell your audience to put them away when they're not, to keep those distractions to minimum so your visual aids, your presentation aids are not overwhelming your audience. Explain clearly and concisely what it is. Don't have them guessing. Wow, what is that? This is a technical pencil. It's lead. It is used for writing. It is helpful for you. It has an eraser, so when you make a mistake, you can correct it. Your audience knows what it is. It's clear and concise. Now that we've talked about that, let's put this down and we'll talk about writing your notes. Good. Your audience now understands exactly what that was there for, why it was there, and it's gone. Take your audience, talk to your audience, not your visual aids. This is another problem. This is a pencil. This is a technical pencil. It's really a nice pencil. I enjoy it. You'll find them very useful. Your eye contact needs to still be out at your audience. This is something you know. You brought it to demonstrate something. Don't talk to visual aids. That includes many different things, even PowerPoints. That's the favorite one. People talk to their PowerPoint. They talk to it during the entire speech, not to their audience. Become the weather person. And as you can see here, you might glance at it for a moment, but don't talk to it. Practice with it. Nothing is worse than getting up there and you haven't practiced using the item, remote control, the batteries fall out, you don't know how to operate it, it's confusing to you, then why are you using it as a visual aid? You shouldn't. Practice with it. And then always check your room's equipment before your presentation day. As I was mentioning with technology, you can walk in, you have a great PowerPoint, they don't have a projector. You have just now lost your visual aid. You'll have to present without it. So when you're doing the catastrophizing that we talked about for preparing for speeches, you better plan for that. Have a printout of your PowerPoint so that at least you know what you're supposed to be presenting on. Better yet, have your keyword outline with you. Here's the 7x7 rule. You'll hear some 5x5s, maybe you'll hear a 9x9 rule. I go with the 7x7 rule. What we're talking about is on a slide, on a PowerPoint, don't overwhelm. I actually have sat down in a class where the instructor said, all right, I'm going to show you a couple pages, take 5 minutes to read it, and we'll start the lecture after that. 2 pages projected onto a screen. 11, 12 font. Guess what? No one could read it. And why? You're there to present, you're there to teach about something. Why have your audience engage with that? They could have just stayed home and read that. So you want to limit how much you're showing your audience. You don't want no more than 7 lines on a slide, no more than 7 words per line, and no long sentences. Yes, quotes, they can kind of push that boundary a bit, but don't have a quote on 3 pages to fit this rule. Instead, perhaps paraphrase, perhaps take a smaller portion of the quote, find a similar quote, something that fits where your audience can easily absorb it, because if you are just going slide after slide after slide to get one quote in, your audience is turning you off. What we want to talk today is about presentation aids. Like we always do, I told you what I was going to tell you, I told it to you, and now I'm telling you what I told you. Using visual aids, the different kinds, the technology, the guidelines. Absolutely, visual aids can enhance your speech. That's the important word, enhance. Not overwhelm, not distract. Use presentation aids to make your content better.